Well, we made it to the final module in our 279W class at Clackamas Community College. And in this final module, we're going to talk about problem-solving strategies, what to do when things go wrong, and also some best practices as well. So let's take a look at the best approach to solving server and network problems. Well, you got to think ahead of time. You can't wait for the problem to happen before you have a plan. So you've got to have the plan, and you got to understand how a server and the network interact, because you are going to have problems that involve the network. You also want to train your users to help you solve problems. You may want to have weekly or monthly training sessions to train users on how to use their computers. You want to solve problems step by step. Don't be making too many changes all at once. Make one change at a time, test it, document it. And you want to track problems and solutions in some sort of a database. So many server and network administrators create a diagram. Typically we use Visio, Microsoft Visio, to create a diagram. And this is what one of those diagrams could look like. So we've got our server farm, we've got our router right in the middle, sort of the hub of where everything connects. We've got switches connected to the router, wireless access points. So this is just an example of one type of network, and this is what we call a high-level view of a network. This is something that doesn't necessarily give you a lot of details. You can have additional network diagrams that, for instance, take just the wireless access points and give information such as the IP addresses, what kind of protocols they're using for wireless security, and other information about that. So one diagram typically isn't enough. You need a high-level one, and then you need some detailed ones as you drill down into each of the different pieces of equipment. So you should have lots of different elements in your diagram, such as the servers, the workstations, the WAPs, network devices, telecommunication links. Sometimes we have phones that are also in the same network as our data, and we need to make sure that that is properly documented. Other times it's on a completely separate network. We also want to have remote links and building locations. So if you have a metropolitan area network with multiple buildings or even multiple locations, you want to definitely document that as well. We need to train our users to make sure that they're doing the right things to kind of head off problems before they start, such as saving their work at the first sign of a problem. So if they're noticing something isn't acting right, you need to tell them to save their work immediately, and then if they have to deal with a crashed computer or a reboot, then hopefully their data will still be saved. We want to record information about the problem as the problem is occurring. And sometimes that helps, especially when you need to go to a third-party vendor to tell them what your issue is, such as you may need to call Microsoft. And if you give them a series of events that led up to your call to Microsoft, then that could help them troubleshoot more quickly. Get as much information as possible about the problem. Record the error message at the time it happens. Of course, you can use the event logs for that. Determine if anyone else is experiencing the problem. Sometimes I get a call that says, everybody in the network is down. I find out it's just one person. So you need to ask more questions. Ask them to ask other people, hey, are you having the same problem? Even if they say they do. Check the event logs for signs of problems. There's lots of good troubleshooting information in the event logs. And not just the server, but also the workstations if they're not using thin clients. Then you've got the performance monitor, data collector sets. These are all things that we talked about and did in previous modules and labs. Use all those tools to check for issues. Check for power interruptions. I've had times where vendors have given me, or clients have given me as the vendor, power to plug into a new server they purchased, and it didn't have enough power to it, so it was constantly browning out and causing the server to crash. And of course, I didn't know that when they handed it to me, but I certainly found out after I noticed the problems were occurring. Determine possible solutions for the problems in your step-by-step troubleshooting. Consider the best or most likely solutions. Most of the time it's the simpler ones. I have had many people call me saying their computer doesn't work, and it turns out they did not turn it on or plug it in. Consider the best or most likely solutions, and by keeping your list of problems that people have had in the past, then you'll come up with a most likely list in the future that will help you get through it much more quickly. Determine how the solution will affect the users. That comes down to what's called change management. You don't want to make changes into a network until you talk to people to see how this change is going to affect other people. Sometimes you have to have a sit-down meeting with the managers of the various different departments and tell them what you're going to do and talk about what the possible ramifications are. After everything is implemented, continue monitoring and, of course, document. Keep that log going. Help desk systems. A lot of larger IT companies as well as computer consulting firms have a program they use for their help desk. And their help desk basically includes all the tickets that they did, which ties into the billing portion of their work. And there's many different products out there. You could use Salesforce, ConnectWise, Microsoft CRM. There's just tons of different products out there that can help you create a help desk system that will not only tie into your billing, but also help you in case you see a problem again to go back and look for the solution. You don't want to solve the same thing over and over and over that's just spread out maybe 6 months to a year where you kind of forgot what it was that you did to fix it the last time. By having that database, you can go right to it. The other thing here is at the bottom of this slide is to have a change log. Create a record of changes. That could help if not only you have an issue coming up in the near future, but also in case this problem gets passed on to someone else, they'll see what it is that you did. If you do have a boot failure where the server just crashes and will not boot again, some of the most common issues could be a disk failure, corrupted partition table, boot file, master boot record. A lot of these different types of corruptions are fairly easy. Well, when I say easy, it might take an hour or two to resolve, to fix the corruption. But a disk failure is a completely different animal. So if you have a disk failure and you don't have a redundant array of disks like we talked about a few modules ago, then you'll have to restore from backup, and hopefully you've got good backups. In most cases, the first step, of course, is to reboot. If that doesn't fix the problem, you got to go to advanced boot options. You got to go into safe mode or boot into the DVD. Sometimes go into DSRM mode, which is Active Directory Repair mode. After you boot into safe mode, you have the opportunity to further troubleshoot the problem. So if it's a hardware device that's causing the problem, then what will happen is the computer will boot into safe mode. It just won't boot into normal mode. If you can't get it to boot in even with all the devices disconnected and it's a domain controller, then you can go into the DSRM mode, which is that disaster recovery mode for Active Directory. So you can press F8 as soon as the computer boots. You usually get the boot menu at that point. If that doesn't work, it may mean that some computers don't have that turned on in the UEFI, so it isn't going to trigger that safe mode option or the DSRM option. If that's the case, just boot off the DVD. And then once you do that, you can easily go in and start troubleshooting your operating system to try to do some repairs. In Server 2016, you can access repair options when you select Repair Your Computer from the Advanced Boot Options menu. Whether that is you press F8 or boot from the DVD, either one of those will get you into there. So if you boot from the DVD, you may also have to have the drivers for your RAID controller if Windows 2016 doesn't have the drivers built in. Otherwise, it won't see the hard drives or the operating system that which you will then use to repair it. So you have some options when you select the Repair Your Computer. You can continue, use another operating system, troubleshoot, or turn off your PC. Troubleshoot will bring you into a command prompt, which is where you'll do most of your work. And that's the reason for that is because the Repair Your Computer option works roughly less than 1% of the time. So don't count on that to resolve your problems. It rarely works. However, if you go into the command prompt and run various different utilities such as check disk or disk part for disk partitions, those tend to work a lot more often. And they're able to fix a lot of the corruption that you may have, and then your server should be able to boot again, as long as there's no hardware problems. When you select Troubleshoot, you can choose from options such as System Image Recovery or Command Prompt. The System Image Recovery requires that you have taken an image, and that's going to mean that you're probably going to have a backup, or you're going to have to do the System Image Recovery command from PowerShell in order to have that image to be able to recover from. So you can try to do a restore if that doesn't work. You can also try to restore the system state data. Sometimes that will get the operating system going without having to restore all of the files. System state data has basically the way the server is set up, including the registry and all of the configuration files, all ready to go. If you choose the command prompt, you've got to be ready with another computer to go online to look at some various different repair commands and make sure you do the right switches. Using safe mode, you can actually go into tables 12.3 and 12.4 and chapter 12, and you can see some of the different ways that you can fix some of these problems. If you are able to get into Windows, or at least get into the command prompt, you can download the Event Viewer logs, and the Event Viewer will sometimes tell you some of the problems that you have. Windows logs, application service logs, and Microsoft logs. Those are the three general categories. So again, if you are able to boot into Windows, it's just not working right, or you boot into safe mode, then you'll see the Event Viewer. You can get into that from the Server Manager. And from there, you can look at the various different errors, go online, and find out how to troubleshoot or fix those. Here are the basic logs: application, security, setup, system, and you can also get forwarded events from other locations. Those are the standard logs that you get with the Event Viewer. However, there's also additional logs that come with every type of role and feature you install. So for instance, if you have DNS installed, there's going to be, under the Windows folder, there's going to be a separate section just for DNS, so you can troubleshoot that. So applications and services logs, as I mentioned, that's when you install certain roles and features, and here are a list of some of the different types of logs besides the DNS one I just spoke about. Each log displays descriptive information about individual events. It gives you description, event ID. Sometimes it gives you the process ID, so you can tie it back to a service or an executable file that we talked about when we talked about Task Manager in a previous module. So sometimes the event log can point you to the right service or the right executable that is actually causing the issue just by looking it up. Each log displays descriptive information about individual events, and pretty much the events that you'll see in there are going to be searchable online. Sometimes the events are too general to be very useful. Other times they are right on the money, and you can use that to fix your problem. To view the contents of a log, in case you have to download the log, you can click the log in the tree under Event Viewer, and so basically you can copy the log off to a working computer, and then you can open up the logs on there in case the event viewer is not working properly. So this is an example of an event log, and it's telling us information such as the event ID, what source is causing this, and what the name of the computer is, et cetera, et cetera. So it gives us some good information we can do searches on to see what the resolution could be. All the event logs in the Event Viewer have a filter option. So if you're looking for specific errors, you can filter to just see those logs, because sometimes you'll see tens of thousands of logs in there, and you may just be looking for a specific type of event, such as a network card or maybe an application like Microsoft Exchange. So you can go ahead and do those keywords, find the events you want, and then you can resolve your issue. Logs can be maintained using several methods. You can create a certain size log. You can either make it a little larger so you can go back more days, or you can make it smaller so it doesn't fill up your hard drive. You could also say to overwrite the oldest events when the log is full. You can archive the log. I like that idea. So basically, once it gets to be a certain age or a certain size, you archive it off to a completely different server with a ton of hard drive space but isn't doing very much. And this could be even another workstation. It doesn't have to be a server. And you can just archive that off into this network share. And then if you have an issue, you can go back weeks, months, or years instead of just a few days or a few hours. So create a maintenance schedule in order to save those logs. You can have that happen automatically for you. You can save it logs as one of these different types of files. I recommend the EVTX because that way you can open it up in any event viewer on any Windows computer. You can also use XML, text, or CSV, but you'll have to kind of cryptically figure out what all this stuff means because it arranges it a lot differently than it does in the event viewer, which is much cleaner. One area that the server and network administrators often troubleshoot is TCP/IP connectivity. So there are many command line tools and graphical tools available in Server 2016. Windows servers and workstation operating systems come with these tools to help you out. You can use PowerShell or command prompt depending on the types of commands you're going to use. ipconfig is one I use a lot. It tells me what the current IP address is, and I can do ipconfig/all to see all the IP addresses. If I have multiple IP addresses, I can do ipconfig release and renew to release a DHCP assigned address and then renew it. So there's a lot of different switches you can use with ipconfig. Ping is another one of those that has a lot of different switches to it. Ping basically says, can you reach another computer from your computer? And so typically I'll do ping -T, for instance, to continuously ping another computer until it starts to respond as I'm troubleshooting it. So that's really handy. There's other pinging switches as well that you'll find. And the netstat command provides information on the types of connections that you have and any transmission errors that the computer tried to send. So netstat -E is a really good one. Netstat -AN will tell you all the different ports that your computer is listening on, and that'll help you with security as well in case something is being listened on that you don't want. So here we have the Windows PowerShell. This looks in black and white, but you'll probably see it in blue and white. And it gives you an idea if you type some of these different commands. This one is the ipconfig command that works in either a command prompt or PowerShell, work in either one of those. So we also have here an example of the ping command as well, telling us we're getting a response. Here's another command, the netstat -E. Tells us bytes, discards, errors, some things like that. Again, it's not as detailed as you might find in a Cisco firewall or some of the other switches out there, but it does give you at least some indication of whether you've got a problem with TCP/IP. You can use a graphical user interface tool for diagnosing issues as well. You can use the network connections window it's used to disable and re-enable the network connections. Sometimes just disabling and re-enabling is good enough to resolve some of your connectivity problems. You can also do, well, what that does is reset the NIC and the TCP/IP connectivity. There's also some netsh commands that allows you to reset the TCP/IP stack, which are a little bit more advanced but sometimes are necessary. So this is the network connections in the Network and Sharing Center. You click on that and then you click on the adapter settings and you'll see this window right here. And that's where you can disable and re-enable your network card. Some server administrators like to use the system configuration tool called msconfig. msconfig has several different tabs, the General, Boot, Services, and Startup tab. So the General tab allows us to force a boot into a diagnostic startup or a selective startup mode so we can troubleshoot our computer. Again, this only works if Windows is booting at all. It's also useful for server administrators to remotely access a server. So sometimes you have to access it using remote desktop or VPN, or sometimes you have to turn on the remote registry service so you can connect to it using the registry, say through PowerShell and things like that. We have the remote tab. This is where you go to turn on remote desktop administration mode. You can go into Control Panel, the System icon, and then the Advanced tab to see the Advanced button or the Remote button, either one will get you here, to see this remote option where you can turn this on. Now, if you see the little checkbox that says Allow connections only for computers using remote desktop with network level authentication. What that does is if you check that box, then it basically only lets domain computers connect to this computer using remote desktop. That's very secure. However, if you're a consultant logging into many different customers, your computer is not going to be a member of their domains. So you're going to want to uncheck that box. But if you're the IT administrator of your office, you want to go ahead and leave that checked because it adds additional security. Some recommendations such as to configure a strong password. You can also force that through group policy as well. So a strong password contains 7 or more characters. Typically now we're recommending 12 characters. Does not reflect qualities about you that others might guess. Don't put in your birthday or your kids' names or anything like that. Not a word that can be found in the dictionary is helpful, so you can't get a dictionary attack against it. Change at regular intervals. Again, you can force that using group policy. Typically, it's every 30 to 90 days. Contains a combination of upper-lower characters, numbers, and symbols. So that would be the complexity one as well. So before problems occur, develop that strategy. So this is a summary of what we talked about earlier. You've got advanced boot options. You've got options to repair your computer. You've got the event logs to also check and try to troubleshoot as well. You've also have command line tools to repair corruption. And you've got remote desktop to access servers remotely if the servers are running, even if they're not running correctly. So we've had our 9 modules are now complete in our 279W class. Get all those labs in. If you need the mini videos in the labs, don't forget to use them. Call me, email me, whatever it is you need, and to make sure that you get these in on time. Don't wait till the last minute. A lot of people do that, and they end up having technical problems they can't get through. So I've really enjoyed being your instructor in 279W, and look forward to seeing you in new classes in the future.